There are many who believe that Domantas Sabonis is the best player on the Sacramento Kings roster. And if you care, the early NBA 2K23 ratings reflect that. But it's still universally believed that the Sacramento Kings are De'Aaron Fox's team. If that were to change this season, would that be a good or bad thing? We'll talk about it on today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time. Time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season and all offseason, presented today by Bet Online. They have you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online, where the game starts. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports reporter and producer at ABC 10 News. And I'll be honest with you right out of the gate, this is kind of a silly conversation, right? A very silly end of the offseason, trying to kill time before the start of next season conversation. And I'll also be very clear, because I know some people are going to interpret it this way. This is not an anti-De'Aaron Fox conversation. And if you actually listen to the first segment of this podcast, you'll understand why very quickly. But really, this sparked in my brain the idea of the team changing from De'Aaron Fox's team to Domantas Sabonis' team, which I guarantee you nobody in the Sacramento Kings locker room, maybe nobody in the Sacramento Kings organization really looks at it that way. This is like a media and fan way of looking at a team. Typically, you see the best player on a roster or the star of the roster, and you deem it that player's team. The Dallas Mavericks are Luka Doncic's team. The Los Angeles Lakers are LeBron James's team. The Washington Wizards are Bradley Beal's team. The Milwaukee Bucks are Giannis Antetokounmpo's team. That's kind of how we look at it. And that's really a way that NBA 2K23 looks at it, right? If you're going to pick the squad that you want to play with in the NBA 2K23 video game, that shows one player. More often than not, it is the best player on the team that it shows. And in the leaked NBA 2K23 ratings for the Sacramento Kings, that best player is not De'Aaron Fox. That best player is Domantas Sabonis. And that might not surprise a lot of people. If you think about it, think about Domantas Sabonis' career, the fact that Sabonis has been to the playoffs, the fact that Sabonis is a multi-time All-Star in the Eastern Conference as a big man, of course, completely different player, completely different position from what De'Aaron Fox plays, but he is an 86 rating versus De'Aaron Fox being an 84 rating. And I'm actually going to spend a tiny bit more time on NBA 2K23 ratings later on in the show. But that sparked my idea. That sparked this idea that right now, I think it's very safe to say that this is still considered to be De'Aaron Fox's team. And what I mean by that is it's believed that the Sacramento Kings are going to go as far as De'Aaron Fox takes them, and that Domantas Sabonis was acquired at the trade deadline to come in, and even if he's had a more successful career than De'Aaron Fox to this point, he is coming in to partner with Fox to help Fox elevate his game to the next level and ultimately to help the Sacramento Kings win games. But what if, let's play this hypothetical scenario out, the narrative changes over the course of the season. We watch, and let's say 40 to 50 games into the season, suddenly we're talking about, man, this is Domantas Sabonis' team. Fox is helping Sabonis, but everything is running through Sabonis. Offensively, Sabonis is leading the team in assists, which I think is very possible, even if it's still De'Aaron Fox's team. Maybe Sabonis is leading the Kings in scoring, probably leading the Kings in rebounding or close to it. Like, Sabonis is dominating Sacramento's statistically, and with the eye test, Domantas Sabonis is dominating how Sacramento plays. That doesn't mean that De'Aaron Fox is playing bad necessarily, but that means that Sabonis is kind of taken over. My first thought when I think of this is it's probably not a good thing. As great as I want Sabonis' numbers to be, Sabonis' numbers, the only other big in the league that is putting up numbers like Domantas Sabonis, of course, they're better than Domantas Sabonis, is MVP Nikola Jokic. Like, that's significant. That's awesome. And Sacramento would love for Sabonis to put up Nikola Jokic type numbers. But we've also seen in the case of DeMarcus Cousins, and this isn't a shot, this is reality. We've seen the case of DeMarcus Cousins, a big here in Sacramento, putting up ludicrous numbers and the team being bad. I think it's more likely that Sabonis put up amazing numbers and the Kings be bad than the Kings put up, or rather than De'Aaron Fox put up amazing numbers and the Kings be good. What I am saying is that if the narrative were to switch midway through the season to this is Domantas Sabonis' team, the only scenario that makes sense in my head is, other than De'Aaron Fox getting hurt, which we're not even going to humor because that's a disaster in itself. The scenario that makes sense in my head is that De'Aaron Fox is not performing as well as the Sacramento Kings are hoping, that the Kings have therefore need more than Sabonis, and maybe that's still enough for them to be in the play-in, but the way we're looking at Fox as the guy with Sabonis going forward has changed. There is a small chance that Fox is still pretty good next to Sabonis, who is just the guy, and the Batman and Robin roles switch a little bit, and Sacramento is a good team. I mean, I think we would take that, right? I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the more likely path to success for Sacramento. What I believe is that if Sabonis becomes the guy here in Sacramento, that means De'Aaron Fox's time is done. And I'm not saying that Fox has to be head honcho in his own mind. Fox has to be the absolute alpha, for lack of a better term here, because that's not Fox's personality. That's what he's paid like, but that's not his personality. Fox does not have to be the absolute head honcho guy, or he's going to throw a fit and he's going to leave. And there are some people that believe that De'Aaron Fox was pouting and throwing fits because Tyrese Halliburton was here in Sacramento taking the ball out of his hands a lot. I'm telling you, that wasn't really the case. It truly was not the case. I know that for a fact. But if Domantas Sabonis is the guy here in Sacramento, if he becomes the guy, if he's the number one on this Kings team, I think it's the end of the De'Aaron Fox era. What I mean by that is I don't think the Kings are achieving to the level that they expect to achieve. Again, maybe they make the play-in still, but they're probably not making the playoffs, because I firmly believe, and I'll talk about this more, once De'Aaron Fox gets an opportunity in the play-in or in super meaningful games at the end of the season, maybe with the Kings in a playoff race, I think he's going to excel. And some of you might turn around and say, well, he had the bubble to do that and he didn't play that well. I look at that as extremely unique, different circumstances. If under a normal NBA season circumstances, he gets a play-in slash playoff slash super meaningful win or you're out games at the end of the season scenario, I think that's where De'Aaron Fox is going to even take his level or his game to a level that none of us have seen yet. I really truly believe De'Aaron has that in him because we've seen it to some extent. Again, I'll talk about that a little bit more a little bit later on. In this scenario that I've created in my head, that the Kings become Domantas Sabonis' team, which again, if any of the Kings were to listen to this podcast, they'd call me foolish for even having this conversation, truth be told. Again, the teams don't look at it as this guy's team. They look at him as like the number one guy or the leader on the team, but they don't label it as that guy's team like we do in the media and like fans do. If De'Aaron's not playing to that level, if Sabonis kind of takes that mantle from Fox here in Sacramento, I think De'Aaron is probably getting traded either at the trade deadline, which probably isn't happening, or next offseason, which is also questionable because Domantas Sabonis could be going right along with him with only 1 year left on his contract, and maybe he's not too happy being the guy here, the guy here on a bad to average team. The best version of the Sacramento Kings is the best way I can sum it up. The best version of the Sacramento Kings, in my opinion, is De'Aaron Fox as the star, as the leader, with Sabonis, Monk, Murray, Barnes, Herter, Mitchell, all supporting him to the best of their abilities. I'm not saying they're rolling over for Fox. They're not changing their games so that Fox gets his. I believe Monte McNair has built a roster to where if everybody is playing at their best, it works together. It blends together. Keegan Murray is at his best when he's playing and helping De'Aaron Fox by hitting open threes and spacing the floor. Domantas Sabonis is at his best when he's drawing attention away from Fox or hitting Fox on the cut. Kevin Herter, Malik Monk at their best, hitting outside shots on the perimeter, and then everybody hopefully playing better defense. The best version of the Sacramento Kings is De'Aaron Fox as the number one guy. Even with how good Domantas Sabonis can be as a number one, if it, between the two, if you were to ask which one as a number one has a better chance to be the number one on a championship contender, it's De'Aaron Fox. And I know that's championship is run before you can walk, before you can crawl, but that's what we're talking about here. Do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that? Again, kind of a weird conversation to have, but I think it's interesting. I think the concept of Sabonis becoming kind of the number one guy here in Sacramento, because the ball's already going to run through Domantas Sabonis a lot. That doesn't mean he's the number one guy. That just means he's a focal point on offense. But if Sabonis were to become the clear, like when we look at the Sacramento Kings and we look at the Kings play, at least to this point, we've all seen, okay, this is clearly De'Aaron Fox is the leader of this team, the best player on this team, or at least that's how they feature him that way. If that were to change to Domantas Sabonis, I think that's a bad thing. I think that is lowering the overall, if we're talking about it from 2K standards, that's lowering the potential overall of this team by a couple notches, by a couple numbers. And that's not a dig at Domantas Sabonis, truly, because I do believe Sabonis is the quote unquote better player based off of what he's done in his time in the NBA. Sabonis has had a better career than De'Aaron Fox. Sabonis has actually won and been to All-Star games. Granted, in the East, at a different position from De'Aaron. Being a point guard in the West, very difficult to make an All-Star team. But the best version of the Sacramento Kings is De'Aaron taking that step into stardom and everybody helping him get there by supporting him with their solid play and following suit. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know at Matt George Sack on Twitter. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. And if you're watching on YouTube, leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Bet Online. BetOnline.net is the number one source for all your pro and college football betting and sports info this season. You can find all the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week's games going on right now. Hey, maybe you made some money the other night on opening night between the Bills and the Rams. Maybe you've bet on one of those two teams to actually win the Super Bowl this year, plus a ton of prop bets they have all year long surrounding NFL betting, all year long surrounding NBA betting. There's a bunch of fun Kings-related futures bets that are out there right now for you to get some action on. Bet Online is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including the MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. If you're into those events as well, head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action at Bet Online, where the game starts. So I know that not everybody who listens to this podcast is a video game person, but NBA 2K is essentially the closest thing we have to NBA simulation. That's why every single year I do simulations on NBA 2K, the latest version of the game, and I simulate 100 times and I share with you the results in a podcast form of what the league or what NBA 2K is predicting will happen. And I'm going to be doing that again once NBA 2K23 comes out. I will be doing that again here on the Locked On Kings podcast. So you might not care about NBA 2K23. You might not be a video game person. You might not have any interest in buying the game. But I will share with you the ratings, because Madden ratings are a big thing amongst players. Madden ratings are a big topic of conversation before the NFL season starts. And you actually have Madden NFL analysts, for lack of a better term, go out to training camp and analyze players and set ratings based off that. I know they don't do that for NBA 2K, but someone released a screenshot of what the starting five ratings for the Sacramento Kings are. And the starting five for the Kings, according to NBA 2K23, is De'Aaron Fox, Davion Mitchell, Harrison Barnes, Keegan Murray, and Domantas Sabonis. So we don't know what Malik Monk, we don't know what Kevin Herter, Trey Lyles, Rashawn Holmes, we don't know what their ratings are. But like I already shared earlier, De'Aaron Fox's rating is an 84. Domantas Sabonis' rating is an 86. Those are the two highest rated Kings on the roster. No surprise there. I'll start with this. Fox being an 84 is way too low. Way too low. Just for me personally. De'Aaron Fox, that rating will, and they update it, of course, over time as the season goes on. That rating will be in the high 80s. I'm guessing by January. I truly believe that. Like De'Aaron Fox is going to have a really, really good season this year. And like I was alluding to earlier, when De'Aaron, not if, when De'Aaron gets the opportunity to play in super meaningful games, and he's played in meaningful games before, but I'm talking about playoff implication games or a play-in game or a playoff series. That's when De'Aaron Fox is going to come out. Because think about the biggest game in De'Aaron Fox's career to this point. What's the game that comes to mind when I say biggest game in his career? It's NCAA tournament, Kentucky versus UCLA, when De'Aaron Fox absolutely dominated Lonzo Ball. Think about the hype, think about the buildup, think about how meaningful that game was, the rivalry, the draft implications. On the biggest stage of De'Aaron Fox's basketball career, he dominated. Again, college versus NBA, you can make all the comparisons or try and sell it short as much as you want. I'm saying for Fox mentally, the biggest game of his basketball existence. It had pro implications, future implications, championship implications in the moment, rivalry implications. It had it all. In that game, De'Aaron was above and beyond the best player on the floor. That's not a coincidence. I've said this before and I'll say it again. And I know there's sensitivity around the De'Aaron Fox and John Morant comparison. I'm going to use it just for this moment, just in this way. When John Morant got the opportunity with the Memphis Grizzlies a couple seasons ago, to play in the play-in, he exploded, right? He had a really good play-in, helped get the the Memphis Grizzlies into the playoffs. They then lost to the Utah Jazz in the playoffs, but John Morant played extremely well. And that offseason, going into next season, star label, star ratings on NBA 2K, star this, star that, star. And he happens to be surrounded by a really good team that elevates his strengths and also can pick up the slack when he's hurt or not having a good game, like hopefully the Kings have built for De'Aaron Fox. I'm telling you, if De'Aaron Fox gets an opportunity in a one-off play-in game, if De'Aaron Fox gets an opportunity in a playoff series, De'Aaron Fox is going to shine. It is going to happen. I've never been more confident in anything, any of my takes. I truly believe De'Aaron Fox, once he gets his opportunity on that next level, he will explode. It's going to be great. He's never had that opportunity other than in college when he shined. In Sacramento, he has never had that opportunity to this point. And before you bring up the Orlando bubble, that is such an obscure, ridiculous circumstance. No fans, COVID, the league had stopped for months. You're out of rhythm. We don't even some people don't even give the Los Angeles Lakers the credit for winning the championship in the bubble. It's almost like a lost year. Like people just filed and tucked that away. If that is the only example of argument we have against De'Aaron Fox, I'm good with that. That's a misnomer. We have not seen De'Aaron Fox in a normal circumstance play in or playoff scenario yet. And when we do, he is going to shine. Hopefully that's here in Sacramento. Hopefully that's this season. Going back to 2K ratings, Fox will be in the high 80s at that point. And after he shines in the playoffs, maybe even might sniff 90. Maybe. Domantas Sabonis is an 86. Fine with that. I think it could go up a couple points as well, depending upon how the season goes. Davion Mitchell is a 77. I think that's the same rating as it's the same rating as Marvin Bagley from what I saw, which okay. It's the same rating compared to the rookies. I think the top 3 rookies had better ratings than him. I didn't see what Paolo's rating was. I don't think that was leaked, or if it was, I didn't see it. It is the same rating as Jaden Ivey in the 4th spot, which doesn't surprise me, even though I believe Keegan Murray should be rated a little bit higher than Jaden Ivey just for principle's sake alone, and the fact that Keegan Murray played extremely well in Summer League. But whatever. I think Keegan Murray is going to be in the 80s by 2023. Personally, that's how I feel. Harrison Barnes is an 80. All right. Hopefully that, for Harrison Barnes' sake, hopefully that number is higher. That means he probably is getting paid more. And for the Kings' sake, if that number goes up, Harrison Barnes is doing better. I have a feeling his defensive ratings are going to plummet in this game. And then Davion Mitchell. I'm sorry, I misread this. I said Keegan Murray was a 77. He's actually a 76. Davion Mitchell is a 77. And like I said, Jaden Ivey is a 76 as well. Marvin Bagley is a 76. I just mixed them up. Davion Mitchell is a 77. And it looks like they don't even have a picture for him yet in the game. Hopefully they fix that. And the team they have them against, just for comparison's sake, is the Golden State Warriors. Steph Curry is a 96. Klay Thompson's an 83. So Fox has a better rating than Klay Thompson by one, but he only has one better rating than Jordan Poole, which I think is kind of weird. But hey, that's the Warriors for you. Andrew Wiggins is an 84, same as De'Aaron Fox, and Draymond Green is an 83. So they think Fox is barely better than Draymond Green. Okay, whatever, fine. It's the Warriors. Not too worried about that. But those are your early Sacramento Kings leaked starting lineup NBA 2K ratings. If you care, if you don't like them, if you think they're fair or anything like that, you want to weigh in on that, you absolutely can do so as well on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack, MattGeorgeSports@gmail.com. If you want to email me, leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Training camp is getting closer and closer, and coming up very, very soon, the beginning of my series with Brendan Nunez, looking at and breaking down all of the training camp battles that are going to happen for the Sacramento Kings, players competing just for roster spots, players competing for rotation spots, players competing for starting spots. We have the full spectrum of training camp battles to go through. And Brendan Nunez is so kind to join me for this entire series. I have no idea how many episodes it's going to be. All I know is it's going to be really, really good, really, really fun. And I hope you will join me for that. Plus, once we get to the end of September, once we get right on the eve of the beginning of preseason, we'll get back to our full-time schedule here on Locked On Kings, 5 episodes a week. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you so much for the support that you've showed during this dry time of the year, August and early September. It's tough, but we've made it through. We've had a great summer here on Locked On Kings, had a great summer for the Sacramento Kings. If you consider what Monty McNair did in free agency and in trades and what he did in the draft and Keegan Murray in summer league, like it's been a phenomenal, fun summer with the exception of this last month for the Sacramento Kings and for me here on the Locked On Kings podcast. If you haven't caught my interview with head coach David Patrick of the Sac State Hornets here in town, he is a friend of Mike Brown. He is a friend of Monty McNair. He's been seen multiple times at Kings training camps and Kings practices. And he joined me to kind of share his background a little bit with the two of them, his thoughts on what the Kings are doing. Also shared just kind of some coach philosophies on how, as a first-time head coach or in your first season as a head coach, as a new head coach of a team, how you can implement change and change a culture. He shares thoughts about that, plus a little bit about his program here at Sac State with a really good interview. Highly encourage you to go and check that out. Appreciate all your support. As always, can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.